So we begin this talk on the language of creating with some sounds, just some patterns of sounds. Now, how these patterns of sounds are being made is through some complex mechanical processes that involve muscles and neurons and electrical impulses and all sorts of stuff like that. But I don't focus on that. I don't think about the mechanics of it. I just notice the speaking happening, the sounds happening. It's not just any sounds. It's not it's like a sequence of sounds that is encoded into language, and you can interpret this effortlessly if you're fluent in English, right? You just effortlessly interpret these sounds into something that is distinct from the sounds themselves, right? Someone else could hear these same sounds, a dog or someone who only speaks Chinese, and these sounds are just a bunch of sounds, but perhaps to you, these sounds are not just sounds, they're also comprehensible language, language that you can comprehend, that you can understand. So I make up with these sounds language, and as I make up these sounds into language, there's attention moving. Attention is moving. There is attention moving. Your attention is moving. Your attention is directed by these sounds. Maybe you can hear the sounds of some children in the background. Well, it's just sounds. So language includes, here I have these three sections: all possible perceptions, what is spoken, and what is perceived. The idea here is that all possible perceptions are influenced by what is spoken. So out of all possible perceptions, what is spoken is just really a subcategory of all possible perceptions. There's what is spoken. And out of what is spoken, what is perceived is influenced by what is spoken. So all possible perceptions are influenced by what is spoken to produce what is perceived. That's one way we could look at it. Another way we could look at it is that all possible perceptions are a speaking, an act of creation. What I call all possible perceptions affects perception now. So we can look at them as a single movement. We can look at them as kind of a sequence of dominoes. There's all possible perceptions, and out of that whole range of stuff, some things are precipitated or whatever by speaking, by what is spoken, and then what is perceived arises as an effect. That's one way to look at it too. The next slide, we back up just to all possible perceptions. Let's look at all possible perceptions. So that's where it starts, right? There's all possible perceptions. Why? Because that's where everything starts. There's all possible perceptions. There's nothing else. And in fact, what if nothing has been spoken yet? What if there's no language? What if I'm a cat? Or what if I'm an infant who has no fluency in language or don't understand the sounds of whatever language is being spoken? Well, there's just everything that's possible, right? Then there's what is wrong. That involves language. What is wrong doesn't exist objectively in the world. There's no wrong color for the roof to be. There's no wrong color for the grass to be. There's no wrong color. There's just different colors. And in language, we get to distinguish amongst different colors, and then we can even make up, in some particular context, a certain color is the wrong one and all the others would be right, or a certain color is the right one and all the others would be wrong, or whatever. So what is wrong is made up in language. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with them? Now that I'm calling the language of hell, or the language of the devil, or the language of suffering, to use a more Oriental or Buddhist terminology. The language of hell, the language of the devil. The devil means diabolos, to throw across, to divide, to put one thing on top of the other like a label that hides something. It's slanderous. So it's the accuser, the process of accusation. What is wrong is divisiveness. It is accusation. It is opposition. It is even resisting. It's condemning, it's blame, it's shame, it's guilt, all these things. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with those? All of that. That's the language of hell. If we don't know it as the language of hell, it is hell. It's not just the language of hell. Once we get a language of hell, then it's not so big a deal. Now, then you go back to all possible perceptions. Amongst all possible perceptions and all possible constructions in language, there's what is wrong and the language of hell. Okay, now back to all possible perceptions. Once again, what if we don't speak English? What if we're a cat? Or we have that infant level of human neurological capacity and function. Then we just get back to all possible perceptions. Now, we can go in that same kind of direction, really, as what is wrong into what is right. And then we have new linguistic constructions about sacred and holy and best and good and what's right about me, what's right about you, what's right about this, what's right about that, what's right about them. All of that is made up in language. Again, there is no the right color. There's no the wrong color. There's no the right number. It's not that the number 6 is better than the number 19 or that the number 45 is more sacred than the number 41. 42 is not really the secret to the universe, as Douglas Adams humorously pointed out in a book called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That was a joke. The point was that the meaning of the universe is not 42. That the meaning of the universe is a linguistic construction, just as 42 is a linguistic construction. Here come those darn kids playing and making noise again. Can you hear them? Are they right? Are they wrong? Should they be older than they are? Should they be taller? Should they speak Chinese better? That's all kind of just some odd constructions in language. Now, of course, many constructions in language are not this relaxed and this playful as what I am speaking with you, but they're still constructions in language. And that's it. All possible perceptions. What is right? And then you can have, again, that's pretty much the flip side of what is wrong with you, with me, with us, with them. Those two go together. They're like branches of the same tree. There's the language of hell with all that. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with my past? What's wrong with the future? And that all gets into, tension and division. It's a curse, we could say. There's shame, there's guilt, there's blame. There's all these things that are neurological processes. They're not inherent. Other things don't have that. Like cats and people without language do not have shame and hell and suffering in the way that people with language can have. These are neurolinguistic or neurological biochemical things. They're absolutely real in a biochemical way. But these are patterns or programs that are grounded in language. They are not essential. They are culturally specific, they are linguistically formed, and they are real neurological networks and real experiences, right? But just being clear, they rest in language and culture, which rests on biochemistry and so on. Just wanting to be clear. There's nothing inherently wrong with the number 41 or the color blue, and nothing inherently right about 41 or the color blue. There's something inherently blue about the color 41. Blue. Oops. And something inherently, distinct about 41 is distinct from the letter E or the color blue or the number 46. They're distinctions. There's no shame in 41. There's a distinction. So, initially you have this division between right and wrong. But then you can get distinctions. There's not just 0 and 1 or just 1 and 2. Not just right and wrong. There's 42, there's a million, there's an infinity. We can get as specific as we want. How many actual numbers are there between 1 and 100? Well, do we mean whole numbers or can we use fractions? And that's, kind of a mathematical joke, but mathematics is entirely made up in language. So the language of what is wrong and the language of what is right are partners. They're flip sides of the same kind of construction. We can get over into some stuff that's a little bit more um, complex, where you have, mathematically lots and lots of variations besides just two of right or wrong. You can get better or worse shades of gray, so to speak. A scale of 1 to 10 instead of a scale of 1 to 2, or a scale of 1 to 100 instead of a scale of 1 to 10. The language of redemption is a new category. Now let's be considerate of these words. There's all possible perceptions, and amongst all possible perceptions and all constructions in language that are possible, we could say perceptions are illusory, not real. Nothing exists. Words are not words. There's no such thing as language, and possibility is impossible. Now I could say this as if this is the most sacred of all things, the most serious of all things. There is no such thing as the speaking. There are no sounds. Words are not words. There's no such thing as language. Perceptions are illusory, not real. Nothing exists, and possibility is impossible. In fact, language is impossible. All possible perceptions is false. There's no such thing as all possible perceptions. That's the language of redemption. I'm calling it the language of redemption. What does it mean? 42. The language of creating. Now, all possible perceptions are distinct from what is actually spoken, which is distinct from what is perceived. So my speaking affects my perceptions. My speaking affects the perceptions of others who understand the language I'm using. That's the language of creating. That's it. What is created? Perceptions, experience, and so on. Everything. All possible perceptions are connected with what is spoken. In fact, all possible perceptions is a speaking. It is a distinction in language. The language of creating. What other language is there? There isn't really any other language. The language of creating creates the language of hell and redemption and all these other things. Back to all possible perceptions or language. There's nothing. At least nothing to talk about. Then we have the language of redemption. Nothing exists. Nothing is possible. This is not real. This is not even this. Perceptions are illusory, not real. Nothing exists. Words are not words. Perception is impossible. Possibility is impossible. Impossibility, however, is possible. Now, let's go on to the language of the devil. Again, the language of hell, the language of suffering. What's wrong with you, with me, with this, with them? That's accusation, that's divisiveness, that's opposition, that's blaming, that's guilt, that's shame. It's condemning, it's resisting. What is resisting? It's something I made up. It's a word. What is opposition? It's a word. What is something wrong with me? That's a linguistic construction. It's amongst all possible perceptions. It's a directing of attention, right? Ultimately, there's just all possible perceptions, which is a creation in language. What is not a creation in language? What thing can we talk about that isn't a creation in language? What part of language isn't language? What part of language isn't a creation in language? What is language? What are these sounds that apparently have some predictable sequence to them, some encoded intelligence, some directing of attention, some moving of attention, some moving of consciousness, some moving of language, some moving of life? Kind of like children going by on their little scooters. Is that what you call it? They have their one foot on this little skateboard type of thing, and their other foot they're pushing on themselves along, right? But they have handlebars at the front. I think that's called a scooter. Life is like that. Language is like that. It's just going by like children on scooters. All these possible perceptions and creations. Here it is. This is it. And there's something wrong with it. And there's something right with it. And This does not exist.